This video is about the period of time known as infancy, which is birth to 2 years old. Infancy is the period of time from, like I said, about birth to 2 years old. At the beginning of this period, a baby is brand new to the world, their family, even their own bodies. By the end of this period, an infant has wildly expanded their grasp of all these things and moves through the world as a curious little explorer, trying things out, testing basic ideas, and soaking up information. During this period, we will talk about the ways that babies get acquainted with what is around them, and how they learn to be purposeful agents in the world. To start, let's watch a short part of this video about a mother talking about her newborn routine. This will give you an opportunity to see what a pretty brand new infant looks like and moves like in the world.
I first get out of bed to the sound of him waking up, so I unswaddle him and I check to see if his diaper is wet with the blue line, and I take him out and give him lots of love and place him on his changing table. This usually means that he's hungry whenever he's like bobbing his head or opens his mouth. And guys, I forgot to put a clean diaper under his old diaper, so he did end up spraying me a little bit and spraying out of his diaper and getting pee all over him, so that was my bad. It is feeding time and I am still nursing with him. We went to the doctor's the other day and he cried.
Alright, so that just gives you a bit of an opportunity to see, you can sort of see both his sort of floppiness, but the ways that he is sort of interacting with mom, and sort of his limited ability to control his body. Now, we'll watch a bit of a video about 2-year-old developmental milestones, so that you can, again, see what does it look like to be at the end of this period.
What should a 2-year-old be able to do when it comes to fine motor skills? Your 2-year-old should be able to make or copy a vertical line, a horizontal line, or a circle. You should see them start to turn 3 pages in a book. It could be the thicker pages, maybe it's a regular page, but the key is that they're not turning them in chunks together. They're able to individually flip at least 3 pages. Your 2-year-old should be stacking 4 to 6 cubes, at least 4 to 6 cubes, I should say. So if you have those 1 or 2 inch blocks, practice stacking, making a tower with your 2-year-old and see if they can follow suit. Finally, your 2-year-old should be able to place 3 different shapes into a shape sorter. A circle, a square, or a triangle, any combination of shapes. I'm getting co-host. Do you want to sit on my lap? They can't see you. Do you want to sit on my lap? No? Okay, to copy actions that you're doing or actions. Ready? Can you jump? 1, 2, jump. 1, 2, jump. That other children are doing. Kai just came home a couple of weeks ago and started screaming. That was new. He picked up that fun one at preschool, I believe. He heard other kids screaming, and so now he knows how to do that, and he practices at home. It's lovely.
Alright, so that video is made by a mom who's also an OT. She does one of these as her son is getting older, and the links to these videos will be on Moodle because she's actually, both of those are great resources. But you can see there the 2-year-old, how he sort of interacts and is able to even follow a simple direction and move about in a confident way in the world. So that's the sort of span of development we're looking at in this time. Now we'll talk a little bit about each stage, and this will happen in each video from this one forward. We'll talk about these different parts of development. So in physical development, at birth, infants have a limited ability to move around on their own due to both limited strength and coordination. So you'll see sort of some movement that's sort of scattered when they're infants, but over the course of the period of infancy, they develop the ability to move with intention and to control their bodies and to use their own strength to support their weight and move around. Motor skills develop as a result of maturation, but also practice, which increases their capacity. So around in terms of gross motor, which is like big body motor, around birth, we can see infants moving their limbs, but in an uncoordinated way, often an accidental way. And they will turn their head to look, especially if there's a noise or something like that. So you can see some basic body movements. And the other thing we see a lot of that's important are reflexes that newborns are born with. Even a few hours after birth, you can see a variety of reflexes like turning your head. If your cheek is grazed, which you can imagine being useful for eating, that you would be looking for the food that's being provided to you. By 2 years old, kids can do lots, as you saw in the video. They can move about in a planful and coordinated way, and we see these movements happen over time, starting with things like rolling over at 3 months, crawling at 6 to 10 months, standing, we hope, around 9 months, cruising, which means walking while holding onto furniture, right? Not being able to do it independently, but being able to scoot along holding onto the furniture, and then walking between a year and about 15 months. So we go from no coordinated movement or a lot of accidental movement and basically reflexes to being able to get about. Fine motor skills, which are your sort of coordinated, more careful skills that you do with both your mouth and with your hands, those sort of little more careful movements. Around birth, we're seeing sucking and swallowing are some of the first fine motor skills. Those come in immediately or should, and if children are having difficulty with sucking or swallowing, that's a concern. And then children are exploring the use of their face and their hands a lot at birth, including both just making sort of silly faces, just learning how those muscles work, and same thing with their hands, sort of learning what these fingers do. By 2 years old, we see a lot of development in this area. Like the video showed you, they can use their fine motor skills to do lots of things, both their own self-care and for exploration. And they can put things like toys in their mouth even at 6 months, do a thumb and finger together grasp, like pinching something, around a year. We should see scribbling by 18 months. And they can feed themselves well with a spoon by 24 months or about 2 years old. Before that, they'll be playing with the spoon or trying to feed themselves. But by 2 years old, you might actually want them to do it because it's getting food in their body. In terms of cognitive development, there's actually big debates in the field about how much babies know and understand in infancy, because it's kind of hard to tell. Piaget, a big theorist in this area, theorized that infants would only understand what they can take in from their senses and what they learned from moving about. He called this the sensory motor stage. Other researchers have demonstrated that babies actually seem to know more than that, more than we thought, and maybe more than they can show us, and that they can reason about some common concepts in the world. Here's some things that we can see infants do during this period. At birth, we see that newborns pretty quickly pay attention to faces and focus more on faces than other things. They show the ability to recognize familiar people pretty quickly, and they'll start to follow things of interest with their eyes very quickly. And one thing that we note during this period that develops over the course of infancy is the idea of object permanence, which is the idea that things continue to exist even after you cannot see them. So if you hide something under a blanket, it's still there. So when infants first are born, we don't recognize them or we don't see them being able to do that. By the time they get to 2 years old, we see that children have definitely developed that particular skill, object permanence. They can find things when they're hidden, even if you hide them under multiple covers. This can be a great thing, or also harder to stop them from playing with things they're not supposed to. They also can do things like sort shapes and colors. They understand that idea. And they can play simple make-believe games, so they have some sort of sense of what is real and what isn't, and can play those games out. Okay, language development. An interesting thing about receptive language, which is the understanding of language, in infants is that they can distinguish different phonemes or language sounds even better than adults, basically at birth. And that's because we lose our ability to distinguish sounds that we don't use in languages around us or that we don't hear people using. However, infants sort of seem to show up with the ability to understand all of those or distinguish all of those noises. And then in terms of thinking about these things, also at birth, we see them turning their heads towards noises, so sort of predisposed to be paying attention in communication. Researchers think that babies can understand their first words around 5 months old. And then by 2 years old, we look for them to understand and follow simple directions. You saw in the video that the child Kai, when asked, "Can you jump?" jumped. And then they can understand the names for many things and point to them in pictures when they are named. So if you say, "Point to the cow," it's likely that they can. In terms of expressive language, which is your ability to express and communicate, in infancy, expressive language starts with non-language sounds like crying, cooing, gurgling. And then babies are learning to express themselves throughout this period. By the end of infancy, 2-year-olds should be able to produce over 100 words. And they can put those words together in 2 to 3 word sentences to communicate ideas. And then finally, social emotional development. When infants are first born, one of their major tasks is to become acclimated to the social world that they've arrived in. They're doing their own baby assessments of how their environment works, who will help them, and how or if they can be safe. They also bring some of their own natural predispositions into the world from birth, which we call temperament. And those may or may not fit well in the circumstances that they have arrived for. They also develop their first relationships during infancy, those that are with their parents, and we call those attachment relationships. So let's talk about that a bit more. Around birth, we expect to see infants working on becoming coordinated with the social world. They aren't initially, but that's their first tasks, and we see that pretty early. They'll cry to express needs and to evoke reactions, and we'll see differences in temperament around things like activity level, quality of mood, attention span. You might hear people say words like, "she's such a happy baby," or "a fussy baby." And then Erickson, a researcher in this area, or theorist in this area, says that the first goal, starting around birth, is figuring out this dilemma of trust versus mistrust, meaning, can I trust that the world is safe or not safe? Can I trust that these adults will take care of me or not? So that's sort of the first social emotional task that infants are working on, is figuring out, is this a safe place or not? Is this a safe person or not? By 2 years old, we see children interacting with other kids more in what we call parallel play, meaning that kids play near each other or doing the same activity. But at 2 years old, we'll even see some interaction. They might chase each other or occasionally engage. We're also seeing more and more independence from mom or from dad or caregivers, and that means that they can get about a bit in the world. However, we're still seeing separation anxiety, which is difficulty separating from parents or nervousness around that when parents say leave you at daycare. We'll see kids copy others, especially those that are older than them, and develop a sense of themselves and even some self-consciousness. Erickson says that towards the second half of infancy, the first second year, infants are working on this dilemma of autonomy versus shame or doubt. It means they're trying to figure out, can I do stuff on my own in the world, right? This more and more independence. Or am I unsure of myself? Am I unable to be effective in the world? So that's the second sort of part of the social emotional development we see in infancy. All right, so as you can see, infancy is a time of big, exciting changes as newly born babies turn into explorers who can learn about and interact with the world. And so much important development happens during this period that becomes the foundation for later stages. So that's part of the things that we want to hold on to when we're thinking about big questions for this week. Here are a few that you want to keep in mind while you're doing reading or for classes. First one, how are parents developing during the period of infancy? How might infant development interact with the development of new parents as they're, especially the first time they're having an infant in their life? How will environmental factors impact each of these developmental areas? You can think about how different types of environments might modify the sort of descriptions I gave you for when things happen or how they happen? How would the outcomes of Erikson's stages, trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame, vary based on cultural expectations for babies or the environments that people are in? A fourth question: as children develop a sense of themselves during this period, what might parents do that could impact self-evaluations in a positive or a negative way? And then finally, why might it matter to learn what babies know or understand? One way to think about this is to think of situations where you might really want to know about the infant's ability to understand what's currently happening or what's going to happen. All right, so that gives you a broad overview of what the period of infancy is like, and we look forward to talking to you more about it in class.